Unilever Ad Hoc Committee, Christine.
What do we have to report? We had a meeting and we had tests, and the discussion was to direct the consultant planner to start writing regulations based on the report, the grant report, and there was also discussion from the consultant planner. He recommended a grant application be reviewed for potential for wastewater capacity at Unilever and into the downtown, and that was directed towards the first selectman. The other areas where we are looking at other areas of this around the state and then also Massachusetts that have existing conditions similar to what we're dealing with Unilever, and considering those regulations, what can be lifted from the regulations, whole cloth or partially, and amended to make them work for Unilever, such as we have DIA area in Beacon, New York, Beverly, Massachusetts, East Hampton, Massachusetts. Those are some of the areas, and they also have housing components as well.
When you say similar conditions, you're referring to environmental conditions or discontinued industrial operations or what?
Some of them are brownfields, some of them are industrial sites that have been reutilized, revitalized, and all of them have added in the housing component to them.
Okay, so it's not specifically the environmental issues that may exist there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions on this. I have a few concerns. I have three concerns. The first is that there have already been extensive wastewater plans for this property. They spent almost 5 years, meaning Unilever, doing all these plans for the property. Some of it involved their own discharge into Hayden's Creek. Some of it involved how to not discharge into Hayden's Creek, and some of it involved tying other parts of the town into their own property. This is another case that I've said before where we already have, or either we already have or somebody else already has a study that is on the shelf somewhere that we're about to spend more money on that may or may not already exist. I follow that up with, we are about to try to get a grant, a matching grant, where the town would have to at least do in-kind services or put up some of their own money for a property that is a private property. That to this date, my knowledge is that nobody has contacted the actual owner of the property to even discuss whether they would allow us. Now, I know they'll allow us on the property.
Is this Long Hill Road?
This is
that's
Unilever.
Or Unilever?
I don't know how you apply for, like, if somebody was to apply for a grant for my property, and I had no idea that you were even applying for a grant for my property, I'd say, well, hold on a minute. It's my property, it's not your property.
So I think, well, two things. Number one, John made the recommendation. We voted on it at the last regular meeting to go forward with it, and we presented it to the first selectman. The first selectman decided that, you know what, planning and zoning, it really isn't their purview to get into this, and water pollution control should. So it's sort of been shifted from us to water pollution control anyway.
And I concur with Gary. I'm on water pollution control, and I was against it. Why would we spend the money on somebody else's property? This is ridiculous.
Well, I'm not necessarily against, if I can, I'm not necessarily against spending money on somebody else's property. The thought process, the way this started, I was involved with it, was that we were trying to make the property more marketable.
Right.
Number one, increase the uses, and now it looks like we're trying to decrease the uses.
Well, from a planning perspective, the thought of solving the Unilever property, making that, if you could solve the septic system there, take the reverse osmosis system and put in some new system that then would also accommodate, this was, John's original thoughts to us, and then to be able to accommodate tie-in from other properties downtown, you reduce the, you allow them to basically develop more of their property, and Unilever will be more marketable. and it would sort of kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
And at the time, I did say, if anybody has any better ideas, if the state is going to give out $10 million and they're going to divvy it up, it's going to somebody. And whether the state should be divvying up $10 million is a whole broader picture. But they're going to divvy it up. So if someone's going to go for it, we should go for it. No one had any other suggestions or any other grant applications. I think we all would have gone after them. But in the end, Bruce decided that it wasn't for us. So
I mean, I agree with everything you said, but at what point do you call the owner of the property and say, hey, we got these ideas for your property? I mean, I'm not saying it should have been us, maybe it should be Bruce, maybe it should be Water Pollution Control, but somebody should say, hey,
Bruce's.
What happened to the money that we got from for the ponds penalty? Why didn't they use that $500,000 for that instead of something else? Okay? And then any other grants that we have, instead of using it on a property like that, use it to the benefit of the rest of the town. I don't, you know.
Christine?
So the first thing I would just want to cover, that we already use state funding and federal funding for the clean water funding that WPCC is doing to go to private properties to look and assess whether they have the capabilities. So that is feasible. You can go to private properties and do that. That's not a problem. Second of all, the existing site has storage tanks. That is, they know that they have storage tanks. They do not have a septic on site right now. So the idea is that we could expand for future uses to actually bring in more of a brand list to the town if we have some capabilities for wastewater on that site. That's, and then that opens up the possibility maybe the town could buy a future, but I'm not, that's not up for us to decide, but it allows a developer. So we've had 2 developers come in and kick the tires. Both of those developers say they need to know what the wastewater capabilities are on that site before they move forward. So that would resolve that area. The third part regarding the matching grants, you do not have to apply your application to state that you're going to match the grant. The only reason you do that is because the state is more likely to give you a match or give you a grant if you say you're going to match it, because they realize that you're actually committed to the process. You're more likely to get more funding, and you're more likely to get that grant awarded to you if you say you're going to have a matching grant.
Wait,
Mr. Chairman.
There was a little bit of a spin on that, okay? The fact that when the Water Pollution Control got money to look at land, all right, private land, that was for the benefit of the whole town. It wasn't for the benefit of that property, okay? It's a different situation.
a couple things. Number one,
I'll let you rebut in 1 second.
I can only go by the 2 grants that I was part of. I didn't have a choice on those 2 grants, whether we did in-kind services or matching grants. So I would disagree with you, respectfully disagree with you on it. You can't just apply for a grant and say, well, we'll give you money, and maybe, so look at us a
This
little bit
grant
better.
has, just from John's words, this grant has no match requirements for this grant, but applications including a match, which can be in kind, are scored higher and have a better chance of funding.
So some are and some aren't. I agree with everything you said, Christine, except, number one, does John Gruskowski know that there's already been extensive wastewater plans for this site? Probably not. And number 2, has anybody called Unilever to ask them? Of course you can do wastewater studies for private properties, but I tell you what, if you come to my property, I want to know what you're doing. You're not going to just, they don't even have any clue that we're doing this. So somebody, whether it's WPCC or Bruce or Mike, can we all agree that somebody should call them up and say, hey, by the way, we've got this huge grant that we're trying to get from the state of Connecticut to do a study of your property?
That's outside our purview. It's not yours, mine. That's the
And
board of
I think
selectmen.
it's sort of water under the bridge, because we're sort of out of this now at this point anyway.
My last, I had 3.
Okay.
We cannot have commissioners from this commission going to other commissions, speaking on behalf of this commission, if this commission has not asked them to go to that commission. That's how it works. I think we're all in agreement on that.
At no point did I represent this commission. I went as the Ad Hoc Committee, and at no point was I recommending this commission. I didn't ask for an action as per this commission. I was strictly there to answer questions. The chairman was aware of it, and the consultant planner was aware of it, and Bruce Farmer was aware of it. So if they would have liked to attend the meeting, they could have as well.
So you went as an ad hoc member.
To answer any questions should
You
there
know
be.
that if you're ad hoc, you were ad hoc member of this commission. So if we're going to create ad hoc, I mean, by your theory, Christine, if we're going to go do ad hoc commissions, and then we're going to just start, because wait till I get on an ad hoc commission, and I'll go talk to anybody I want. So depending on which side of the fence you're on, you wouldn't like it if I was on chairman of an ad hoc committee, and I went and talked to some group, and you didn't know it, you'd be
Strictly
pretty
there to-
upset. It's
strictly
always
there to answer
about,
questions.
were you invited?
I was.
Then why didn't you, why? Nobody here thinks that somebody should come to the whole board if they're going to go talk on behalf of the board.
So when the planning committee went through the process of meeting with every single board and commission in this town to form the plan of conservation development, do you think that they went back to every board member of the planning and zoning commission and asked for approval every other day to meet with those boards and commissions? There's a process in place
Christine,
that
I would say that
becomes
that what
instructive.
should have happened was this commission should have said, we're putting the plan of conservation and development together, and therefore we are going to enable the chairman of the plan of conservation and development to talk to multiple groups within the town. No single member should be acting on their own unless they're directed by this entire commission. You guys said that to me, Christine, when I was chairman. So I love how things just get turned around when it's convenient.
Well, I was there to answer questions,
And
and
it
I
was
wasn't
wrong.
there representing the
And it
whole
was
entire
wrong.
commission, so.
I believe it was wrong, just in a record, we don't have to keep talking about it. But in the future, I'd like to see this whole commission, including myself. If I'm ever the head of something, and I go and Amon does not know that I went, I don't think that would be right. So I'll hold myself to the same standard.
I'm a member of that commission, and when you came, I thought you were representing planning and zoning. Although I didn't question it, I don't know why, I just didn't think about it.
So I'd like to
And
address.
the truth be, at that point in time,
I mean, it was a
It was-
positive meeting, I was,
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I am not,
Bruce had already at that point directed it away from planning and zoning. So,
I don't have any problem with the content of the report, that it was a positive meeting or anything. It's just the policies and procedures, as we have gotten ourselves in trouble on this board, they should be followed.
So regarding the extensive studies, if you could point us to them, that would be great. But so far, the land use office doesn't have any extensive studies. When we worked on the Unilever report, this marketing company and planning company came in and went through all the reports that were available to them in the land use office, and they weren't given any of those reports specifically. You also have the health district would love to see those reports as well, because they don't have any of those reports. So where
So
are
you
they?
know, do you know, you're new to town, so do you?
I'm not new to town, Gary. I've been here quite a while.
Okay, well, you
I
don't
don't
know.
have to be
Christine.
born and bred here to be new to town. I
Christine.
take that as very offensive, actually.
Okay. The history of Unilever, about 15 years ago, they were discharging into Hayden's Creek.
Well, we're-
Remember that? And the town gave them a hard time. DEP got involved. Pratt Road got involved. I don't know who has the studies. I know DEP has the studies, right? Because they were the lead,
Who paid us, Gary?
right?
Who paid us?
Unilever paid us.
Then there has to be a trail of why they paid
So
us.
at
right?
a minimum, the property owner has it, and yet nobody has asked the property owner if it exists. So again, we haven't talked to the property owner, who may be able to say, oh, well, here you go.
But you're talking about discharging, you're not talking about a
It
wastewater.
was-
So they have storage tanks on the site. We're well aware of their storage tanks on the site. We know that there's no septic on the site. You're talking about discharging. Were they discharging from pipes, from the tanks inside the building?
Their whole plan
Pipes into the river.
was how to not discharge. That was their violation. So their whole engineered plan was how to not discharge into Hayden's Creek. That's how we know some of this exists. Now, that's 15 years ago, so the technology in the last 15
Probably a
years
lot better
is
anyway,
probably a
but-
lot better. But again, at a minimum, I would implore my chairman to reach out to WPCC and to Bruce and say, hey, I can't even believe I'm having an argument over this, that maybe we want to call the property owner and say, do you have anything?
They have to have it, they pay us,
Not only did they pay us, they were trying to become compliant
become compliant,
with
remember that?
DEP. So they went so far as to have engineers start designing systems.
So that's the storage
And then they left,
tanks.
and then they left.
So that's the
No,
storage
They
tanks.
were gonna do a septic.
I mean, I have knowledge of it, I should have said something. I didn't.
Verbally at this point, I mean, we don't
Doesn't
know.
matter.
Chris, I think you just want to argue with me. Can we call Unilever and see what they got?
That,
That's it.
I will talk to Bruce about trying to.
Maybe they have nothing,
What they've
maybe
got.
they have.
And if not, the broker or
Pot of
the
gold.
property would be probably the one to go to at this point. Because theoretically.
I think what we should do is, we go to our consultant engineer, CDM, ask them to check it out.
Well, really, at this point, it would be for you on water, for water pollution control to do at this point, because we're.
What Gary's saying is correct, I don't know why I didn't think about it, I've been here forever. And, you know, there was a big controversy about Evans Creek, and, no, it's a good point, you know?
All right. Should we move on to the minutes then?